Welcome one, welcome all to Joe's Writers Club, JWC Livestream, Story Autopsy with Ricky and Tom. Right back at you every Thursday at this time. Talking about creativity, talking about what makes stories tick, post-mortem, etc. We read, we discuss, we have topics. It's a lot of fun for me. I love making shows like this. Tom, are you there?
I'm here.
That's excellent. Excellent to hear, co-host. And how have you been creatively lately? We'll give Amber, our special guest author, the little extra time she just may need to be ready.
Yep.
How's your creativity been, and how are you doing, sir?
This has been a really good week. I finished my nonfiction work, which is tentatively titled "So You Want to Be an Author, a Writer?" Sorry, and I also finished. People are very glad to hear this. I finished my Florida novel, first draft. So Blood on the Sand is done. Now to go back and see what I've got.
Yeah, that was a mythic undertaking. All these, ever since I've known Tom, and I've known Tom for years now. He's been working pretty much. It was around the same time he's working on this Florida novel, verifying his creative obsession by writing on his vacation. The man cannot be separated from the creative force. It seems he has to take it along with him even when he's vacationing, and that's how it is with all true creatives now, isn't it?
Yep.
But we won't take any feathers out of Tom's cap, though. The Florida novel has a heck of a potential as a horror story, and I know you're gonna cut me a PDF pretty soon, right?
Oh yeah.
How many words is that total? And it's a first draft, I know. So
yeah, 70,000.
Cool, very good.
Who knows?
Very good. Amber, welcome. How are you?
Sorted out my technical issues, so I'm pretty good.
Awesome.
Excellent. Very nice. Yes, we were all still just checking in. I figure I'd swing over to Tom over there and see how he's doing. Now, how about you? How you been, and how's creativity going for you?
Well, I started a NaNoWriMo project this month, about 1,000 words into it, which means I'm behind, but I can catch up. It's the writing prompt was going around Facebook a little while ago. I don't know how many people actually saw it, about a story about a mostly blind old woman who accidentally summons a demon and mistakes him for her goth grandson.
I did see that prompt, and I know you're involved in it, but for some reason I thought it was something you cooked up, because it sounds like something you would cook up. So
sure.
It makes sense, right? No, yeah, exactly. Tom's not surprised. So anyway, you got it off of some NaNoWriMo thing, huh?
Yeah, the basic premise I got off of a Facebook writers group, but what the direction I'm taking it in is my own. Other people have done short stories or graphic novels with this idea, but what I'm doing is the fallen angel who is the demon that gets summoned by grandma wants to be redeemed. So he's so enchanted by the way grandma treats him that he completely switches allegiance and defies Lucifer to stop the apocalypse.
I see. A rebel of a rebel of a rebel.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. That sounds cool, man. That sounds cool. Groovy. How many words is it supposed to be?
I don't know how many it'll be when it's done. All I know is I have 1,200 so far and a pretty solid idea, so I'm guessing around 70,000.
Nice. Dude, do it. That sounds great. I'm interested to see where you go with that. Sounds Nidhoggy. Sounds like it could plug into Nidhogg pretty easy. Similar paranormal fiction type stuff going on. I dig it. Well, that's cool. That's plenty to work on. I'm doing Chiron 6. My sci-fi novel just hit 30,000 words like today at some point. So I'm literally like halfway, right in the midway of that book. I'm writing it at Athenaeum with David Anderson, and we only have like 12,000 words of that left between the two of us. So that's cake, you know, another couple weeks. And I've been throwing down for that Choose Your Own Adventure book. And I know Tom has been too. So that's been interesting. All right, then. We are checked in. Our creativity is on full display. So Tom is going to read more Shirella, Amber. Did you want to read today? Because if you weren't going to be able to make it, I was going to read a chapter of Babbletron. But if you have something to read, I'll gladly defer the time to you, you know?
Well, audience's choice, really. I have that kind of dismal, depending on how you look at it, crime short story that I could read. Or I could read the opening that I have for that grandma and her demon grandson thing, which it's only about 1,200 words. Or I could read one of the mythological creature stories.
I think you should read your opening for your grandma story, personally. 1,200 words is a nice, tasty budget anyway. So why don't we do that? Do you have it open? Can you do that?
Yeah, it's open now.
Cool.
Okay, great.
See if this thing will cooperate about screen sharing today.
That would be nice. Yes. Oh, David Anderson is
here. Would actually cooperate.
David, welcome.
The David Anderson.
Yes.
Yes. Except no substitutes.
No, except
welcome.
None will be accepted. Yes, welcome, sir. Now we're really. Go ahead.
I had a feeling I was in high demand, so I just wanted you guys to get the authentic David Anderson.
That's right. Imported from the French Alps. Here he comes.
Yes. Bottled in the French Alps.
Well, it won't let me share.
Oh, well.
Well. Sorry, folks. I think she's just going to have to read it then. Are you okay with that, Amber?
Yeah, that's fine.
Right on.
All right. I don't really have a title for this yet. Fenix sang to himself while he sharpened his sword, a dirge of loss and sorrow. He didn't relish the idea of slaughtering humans as did others of his kind, but his existence had undergone a dramatic change since the fall. Now he was stuck, fighting for a cause he no longer believed in. Things were different when the humans knew how to play with the occult. In the Dark Ages, demon summoning had been popular, giving fallen angels like Fenix a little variety in their dreary new lives. But then the insufferable church did its best to exterminate those familiar with the black arts until the knowledge was all but lost. He tested his thumb against the bit of blade he was focused on, grunted with satisfaction, and moved on to the next bit. The grinding of metal against the whetstone annoyed his ears, so he resumed his song. Dating back to a pre-Columbian civilization in South America, precursors to the Chibchas and all but forgotten, the song was one of his favorites. And keeping it alive for a few thousand years in no way dimmed the bitter joy he found in the dirge. Isolated by choice, Fenix wanted little to do with his fellows among the fallen, and less so the demons beneath them. Though he commanded legions and could join into any war games among the demons and be welcome, Fenix felt most alone when surrounded by the soulless yammering of the damned. He would do as Lord Lucifer commanded, but he didn't have to like it, and he didn't have to lower himself to participating in torture. With a sigh, he set his sharpened sword aside and began an examination of his arrows. Human weaponry had advanced since the Bronze Ages, but Fenix and his fellows still preferred the personal touch of primitive weaponry. Eons of practice made for deadly fighters, each of them prepared to lay down their eternal lives in the planned siege of heaven. But first, Earth. Satisfied with the state of his arrows, Fenix selected a soft cloth. With a pot of oil made from rendered human fat, he painstakingly polished the intricate carvings of his wooden bow stave and the long, smooth shafts. Restringing with fresh gut took mere moments. After giving the string a good twang, he nodded and returned the bow to its wall hooks. From what he understood, Lord Lucifer's plans for the upcoming conquest of Earth were nebulous and long-reaching. Every time anyone would inquire, Lucifer's answer was always the same. The timing was wrong. Phoenix had no idea what he was waiting for, and unlike the other fallen, he didn't care to speculate. Unlike Lord Lucifer and the others who followed him, Phoenix longed to return to heaven, not by force, but through forgiveness. He shook his head to banish that useless thought and fell to polishing his armor. Like honing his blades and barbing his arrowheads, it gave him something to do. His voice rose in song once more, this time a folk song from the 1500s. Do you have to screech like that? The caustic voice caused Phoenix to look up with a wry twist to his lips. Hello, Bellarchus. Don't you know how to knock? I did knock. Twice. You were too busy caterwauling, the demon general retorted with a grin. Phoenix snorted and resumed polishing his breastplate. Is there something I can help you with? Bellarchus hooked his thumbs into his sword belt. You've been alone in the armory for almost 100 years. It's time to come out. The troops miss your speeches. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be thorough. It's the mark of a job well done. What do you need shiny armor for anyway? Bellarchus furrowed his brow, peering at his dim, distorted reflection in Phoenix's helm. The demon's own armor was a sinister, oily black. I like the humans to get a good view of their own demise, Phoenix said, dry as ever. As expected, the joke sailed over Bellarchus's head. You can't get a good view in these pieces, just messed up bits. Phoenix sighed, set the breastplate aside, and picked up one of his greaves. The shininess gives me an advantage when fighting light-sensitive creatures in the daylight. Or perhaps you don't remember the sun? Humans aren't that light-sensitive. They are when the sunlight bounces off my polished armor straight into their eyes. Trust me, it's worked before. The greaves were etched with ancient symbols of power, strength, and love. The set of armor, like all the armor worn by the fallen, had been crafted in heaven from the rarest of metals and engraved with holy magic. Bellarchus eyed the metal in Phoenix's hands with distaste. How can you bear to wear that? Phoenix shrugged, though the question made him unhappy. It's the best armor ever created. Why would I not wear it? The other fallen don't, not for a couple decades anyway. Belial said it reminds him too much of what he lost. Though the same reminders never failed to spear into Phoenix's heart each time he beheld the armor crafted for him by his father, still he could not bear to part with the only reminder of love he had once known. Do you think it is better to be feared than loved? Phoenix kept his gaze on the delicate task of forcing the rag into crannies with his talons. Why not? Bellarchus cocked his head, clearly confused. Why would you ask? Demons don't even know love of any kind. We're content with hate and rage. The mortals fear us, which gives us power over them, and I must say that's fine with me. Remembering the love of his father, love he had so callously thrown away in his jealous rage all those eons ago, Phoenix said nothing, unable to trust himself to speak. Don't you enjoy being feared? Bellarchus coaxed. Seeing the fear on their faces when you appear before them, the way they shudder and whine like beaten curs. How could that compare to the shining warmth of love? But Phoenix didn't bother to say so. Bellarchus had no frame of reference, no way of comprehending what he was missing. It was like asking a fish if he would rather fly. Oil for the leather fastenings of his one greave, then on to the other. It is all I get from mortals, so I suppose I must be content. Bellarchus paced, his great leather boots punishing the smooth stone floor. I sense what you will not say. You are unhappy. Phoenix shrugged, rag wrapped around one taloned finger as he picked at specks of dust and grime wedged in embossed angelic faces. Brothers and sisters, some he would never see again, some who had fallen with Lucifer. Why does God's mercy extend so deeply for humans, but for us, his first creations, one error in judgment is unforgivable? And that's exactly as far as I've gotten.
Very good. Lots of good details. Lots of thoughts on the page.
Bravo, good voice. Feels very paranormal fiction, but also like this whole, because I know you're dipping into the occult with the Solomonic magic regarding the one dude, Phoenix. He seems to be your main character, yes?
Yeah. I'm telling half of it from Phoenix's point of view and half of it from the blind grandma's point of view.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah, well, that's that Enochian cipher and the Solomonic magic. That's all that that demonology and stuff. It's good world building. You're mixing that with like a Judeo-Christian treatment. I dig it. I mean, you could paint a lot of different characters in such a with such a palette to work with. And the voice is great. That's the first draft, right? You just threw that down recently?
Yeah, that's except for changing my placeholder name to the Chibchas, that's completely unedited.
Right on. Tom, what did you think of that read, man?
Some really excellent imagery, and some good history going back to the
That's
weapons
right.
and the old ways, and how the demons don't care how much we've evolved, you know, weapons, etc. We they said we'll just keep the old stuff works just as well, you know, and
well, there's also the fact that not everyone knows this, but Native American archers were so advanced that they could fire their arrows faster than the musketmen could reload. Like way faster, something like 3 or 4 arrows by the time a musketman reloaded. They were fast with it. They were.
Yeah, it takes a minute minimum to reload the musket. So yeah, I could see arrows.
Like plunging the rifle and packing the powder, and that's assuming everything goes ideal. A competent archer can lose plenty of shafts in that time, no doubt about it.
Yeah, anyone who's seen The Lord of the Rings, the way Legolas shoots, that's about how the Native Americans were able to shoot. They pretty seriously.
You practice, you're gonna make perfect sooner or later. And if you grow up doing it every day of your life, and it's about your livelihood, you're reaching into the transcendent, like for the talent. So it's like, forget it. You can achieve almost superhuman quality with it, no doubt.
Sure. I was out in.
Speaking of long practice enabling you to do stuff, that's why my first draft is so clean. I started writing when I was 12.
Yeah, no, I know. You've been at it hammer and tongs for quite some time, and it's, in my opinion, it's evident. Tom, you were gonna say something?
I was about 30 years ago. I was out in Montana with the let's see, what tribe was that? Gesundheit. The Crow Indian tribe. We were at a Custer's Last Stand event, and they had the bows. I said, "Could I try one?" He goes, "Sure. First, give it a pull." And I said, "This is a bow we give to a teenager, and that's tough. It was really hard to pull." But then again, I lost a tug of war with a monkey the size of my dog, so a tiny little thing. So it might be me.
Well, I don't know about your prowess as an archer. I just know it requires a tremendous amount of tone strength to be a quality archer, someone who can make the mark all the time. David Anderson, were you able to hear that read of Amber's? And you have anything to say about that?
Actually, I had a little computer glitch thing that I had to take care of. I apologize.
No, not at all, man. That's all we got is technical difficulties, all of us, the last couple
like just a second ago, the audio on your end, like I saw you talking, and then there was no audio, so I don't know what's going on. I think it's on my end.
Yeah, don't worry about it, bro. It's all good, man. So that was a great read, Amber, and we're looking forward to hearing more of that project. Keep up the good work there. Tom, how about you, man? You got some more Shirilla for us?
Oh, yeah. Well, let's see. We'll continue with Night of the Raven Rats. We last swept out. We were talking to a king was overlooking a fire that was advancing on one of the temples in his kingdom. Let's see here. All right, we have Tacit no longer feared the king. Power had long ago slipped from Varan's grasp, leaving the old man a puppet of his ministers. They held the true authority in Anir. The general populace did not know of this, nor would they ever know. Varan's mind had lost its edge, trapped in a body that grew weak with each passing month. He issued orders that were ignored or changed by the ministers. Varan had no heirs, and Tacit knew it. His efforts to find a trace of the royal bloodline in Anir turned up nothing. Tacit moved slow through the castle, sure of his movements and motivations. By royal charter, council vote would pass the crown to Tacit. This would involve having Varan declared unfit to rule or dead, whichever came first. But Tacit was not ready to rule under these circumstances. His faith would not allow something so underhanded, but the years had seen that faith fade. Now he almost welcomed a circumstance that would lead to a new ruler of Anir. Sire, began Tacit, joining the king at the window. The border committee has been at the widest part of the River Kylan for a score of days. Has the committee reached any decisions? What about the blockade idea we discussed? A blockade would insult the Islaki. They control the river at that point. All the Southern Union depends on the free flow of goods from Islak and the north. Talks are underway at this point with the Sarai, the second-tier praetor of Islak. Sarai is too stubborn, and he'll never agree to a blockade, even a partial one. Look at that, will you? Varan pointed out the window, and Tacit stepped up to see what the king's interest. The fire had now reached the west bank of the park near the Temple of Esh. From the east bank, 4 fire lizards strode out to the fire's edge. Each was the size of a pack horse. They strode to the fire and into it without hesitation. Around them, the fires faded. Smoke poured into the sky as the creatures consumed the fire. A movement caught the eyes of the king and Tacit. Kyrus, 10th Order Shard Mage, walked to the edge of the fire. He owned Orti, the Shard of Ilmorak, god of the holy fire. Nasty by disposition, he had allied himself with the Esh temple. The mage looked into the distance where the fire had arrived at the grand hall of Ilmorak. Kyrus raised his hands and brought them together. His fingers bent to form a dome. He held in his hands at his throat, elbows bent. The fire, which had eaten into the hard wood of the temple roof, now spun. It formed a cone like water going down a drain. Fire peeled away from the building, swirled toward Kyrus. As the mage held his hands out, he extended his arms. The fire narrowed and moved between his hands, where it disappeared. Hungry, the fire lizards moved into the burning buildings one by one. As they consumed the flames, the area filled with smoke. Kyrus continued to remove the fires from the roofs of structures and trees the fire lizards could not reach. Within minutes, the fire in the park was out, and the buildings were being hit with water from the town's fire brigade. With no fires burning, Kyrus turned to face his temple. The fire lizard slinked past him into the morning mists. Kyrus lowered his arms to his side. The apprentices of the Esh temple who had been fighting the fire all dropped to one knee and lowered their heads to Kyrus. They stood and entered their temple. Kyrus turned and looked up at King Varan. As he nodded, a flash of bright light issued from his forehead for an instant. The mage turned and walked back into his quarters. An amazing display, said Tacit. Yes, but at what price for the Temple of Esh, said the king. A little less neutrality on important votes in the council, ones that we can ill afford to lose, said Tacit as he moved away from the window and sat down in his chair. As if Kyrus didn't already have the most powerful voice of any non-minister in Anir. This puts the Esh acolytes in his hands. This will not go well with the grand hall of Esh. The king moved to his throne, his movements slow, as if his thoughts took the most of his energy. We may sweep the temple clean, and replace with new acolytes, starting with the apprentices. If you wish, it will be done. What of Kyrus? Shouted Varan. He already sees himself as Lord Mayor. We must find someone to oppose him. There is Morace, head of the farming guild. He holds a great sway with the land managers and farmers in the south and west of Anir. Everyone south of the river Kylan will go his way if he runs. Nothing between here and Islak can stand up to those numbers. Except Kyrus himself, came a rich, distinguished voice from behind the two men. The king and Tacit turned to look at the figure in the doorway. A chill ran down Tacit's spine as he beheld Mordain, special minister to the king. Fluttering caught their eyes. Tacit and the king looked up and saw a small window was wide open. A small green and white pennant swung in a gentle breeze. It was a window that was never opened due to it being a demanding job to close it. They dropped their eyes to watch Mordain enter the room. The mage approached at a slow but steady pace. With each step, the left side of his mouth and his left eye made a slight twitch, as if he were in pain. Mordain occupied the temple of the White Z at the eastern edge of Osingil. At least that's where everyone assumed where he lived. Disciples of the goddess Zala kept to themselves. They contemplated the glorious nature of the goddess. She was the goddess of pain, and demanded a high price for her faithfulness. Low-ranking acolytes and mages studied pain in all its guises, from simple indigestion to amputation and beyond. Many were masochists, delighting in inflicting discomfort upon themselves. High-order mages often turned to sadism, with all its inherent obsessiveness and murderous temptations. Of all the deities in Varema, Zala's disciples relished their studies. Mordain bore the rank of fifth order mage, but that was a mere defensive shell. He was much more than a mere sorcerer. Of that the king was certain. A thin silver armband gripped his left arm just past the wrist. To Varan, he owned several of these bands. For every time he spoke with Mordain, the stone embedded in the band was a different color. The mage himself was impressive to behold. He kept his hair and a small pointed beard immaculate, as were his fingernails. One dark gray and one bloodshot eye centered themselves upon a thin, beak-like nose. A mouth of perfect teeth was a gateway that emitted the most sickly, sweet breath any of them had ever experienced. Out of respect for Mordain, they did not mention this, just endured. The face reminded Tacit of a falcon. His robes were always spotless, and few would argue that he would ever need a tailor. He would have a tailor at his disposal. An elaborately sleeved cape always wrapped around him whenever he left the temple. A stiff, tri-colored cap clung to his skull. A thin braid of black hair slid out behind his left ear and down past his shoulder. Stiff, thick terrain boots finished his outfit. They were older than Varan, yet he still kept shiny with a military polish. The robe, cap, and cape were all dark gray, at least to the naked eye. A closer look revealed the tightest weaving of black and white threads, almost too small to count. The fabric comes from a process known to a handful of seamstresses in one of the Vicalian provinces, Mordain remarked to Varan one day. Mordain, please come in, said the king, who sat with renewed liveliness. He knew Mordain more than he appeared to be. After years of studying the man, the king was sure that he was one of the magic folk. Tacit was less enthused to see him, as he was a disciple of Chen Kodo, the goddess of eternal light. The hairs on his neck stood up, warning him of danger whenever Mordain entered the palace. By royal decree, all ministers of Anir were to live and work in the palace, all but Mordain. He came and left as he pleased. Though they rarely saw him doing either, he always seemed to arrive at times of stress or emergency, as if he were always listening. Sire, you must do something about Kyrus and those horrid lizards, said Mordain in his soothing voice. Someday an innocent could get eaten alive by one of them. I have spoken to Kyrus, and he assures me that they only eat fire, said Tacit. And you believe him, Mordain said with contempt. To Tacit, the meaning was clear. Tacit glanced at the king. Varan looked at him like a gullible fool. Without a word, Tacit turned on his heel and left the room. Mordain smiled. He had the king alone, as he always did when he had important matters to discuss, alone. There is news from Kelsh, your majesty. It comes from the temple of the White Z in the city's hearts. Varan sat up, his mind clouded as the mage spoke. Mordain's words rolled off his tongue so smooth that Varan could imagine the mage putting a tusk mammoth to sleep by talking to it. Sometimes it seemed to her as if Mordain was in his presence for mere moments, but the king's valet say that they were often alone for entire afternoons. Varan didn't believe a word of it, yet he wondered why the days he spent with Mordain seemed shorter than other days. No matter. He would ask Mordain one day how they spent so much time together. So there's that.
Delightful as always. Taking a trip to Varema, always a pleasure with that voice. Got that sword and sorcery touch, and I'm just always impressed by your world building. The way you drop these subtle industries and regions and religious items, relics, god shard, monsters, god shards. It does everything that high fantasy and swords and sorcery should do. And I love the flow of it on the page. It's got some great pace, as always, man. I mean, Sharella's she's the real deal. Amber, what did you think of that read?
Very well done. I love your world building. You really immerse us in the new atmosphere to help us forget the real world.
Very, very critical thing for those.
Yeah, it's excellent for reading.
I always believe that a good book should get you off your mind off everything else around you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, transport you through mind theater to some other place convincingly enough where you don't miss your own body. You know, that's I use that term mind theater, and it's about that transportive effect that can make a whole afternoon vanish into a read. You get a really good fantasy novel, man, oh man, you could delete a weekend by accident diving.
Or you look up and it's 2 a.m.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it's like time travel. You know, you go to motor vehicle commission, it's the exact opposite. It slows down to a disgusting crawl.
Right.
But when you read something awesome or you're watching some fantastic piece of cinema, it's time travel. It's over before you even notice, and you're just like, oh, like you just said, oh, it's 2 a.m. I should have went to bed like 4 hours ago. I have to get up tomorrow. It's like.
Yeah, I've watched movies that were 90 minutes that felt like 2 days, and I've watched movies that were 3 hours that I couldn't believe it was that long. So
totally. David, just checking in. I don't know if you want to make any comments. I figure I'd offer you the floor there.
I really enjoyed it a lot. The world building, obviously, but also just the indulgence of getting lost in all of those very descriptive bits and pieces of all of the details of the dress and the.
Yeah,
I'm losing myself because I don't know as much. Clearly, I don't know as much as everyone here present about fantasy. So I'm coming at it more from the aspect of a student, but I was thoroughly interested during the entire time you were reading. So that means that you're writing truly, I think.
Right on.
What's interesting is this particular passage. We were introduced to the main villain of the entire series is Mordain, a really bad dude.
It was well described.
Yeah,
So
right on, right on.
it's he was a labor of love to keep him keep reinventing his nastiness for whatever 3,000 pages. Wait till you meet his daughter. So
Well, keep keep it coming, Tom. Thank you for reading. Thank both of you. I think I'm going to take a turn, and instead of us doing a topic, I think I'm going to read a chapter out of my novella today. I kind of feel like it, and I think we have just enough time to do that and chat about it. So without any further ado, this is chapter 4 of Babbletron, After the Fire. The chapter title is Out in the Dead Zone. Big Daddy and Dawn hustled through the early morning light for shelter, finding a dilapidated garage overgrown with blighted plants snaking up from the poisoned soil. They spent the day readying themselves for another night's journey, with Big Daddy dressing Dawn in spare gear he copped from the vaulted bunker, all the while whispering to her about the settlement nearby. Dawn's black garments contrasted her dead pale skin and eyes of winter green. The rash on her face looked livid, but overall she seemed better. Big Daddy shared his supplies of food as well, watching her eat cautiously and retch several times to keep it down. Battle within her guts. After a battle within her guts, Dawn eventually sat by Big Daddy and fought against sleep for most of the day. They were too close to the place of terror for her, far too close to let her guard down. She begged BD to put her down, rather than let them have her again, saying she would be better off dead. Big Daddy couldn't disagree and gave his word to do the right thing, should that time come. It was not his intention to let that happen, however. He patted the grenade launcher with a spirit of material fondness, wishing to use it on whatever idiot was stupid enough to follow him after the ruckus he made. They departed at full dark, taking great care to move silently when remaining mindful of all nocturnal noises. The wind was rushing in and out in loud gusts, rhythmically dispersing banks of traveling mist. Moving steadily toward where the arrows in his optical field intended them to go, they climbed up a hillside dotted with what used to be rail posts for a landscaped deer path. Although Dawn was a tough cookie, she had to heave for air once they made it to the top of the embankment. Big Daddy heard her sucking wind and focused his optics out over the upper landscape. To the east, he saw the fringes of the industrial park where he encountered the Millimek, with nothing but the wind rushing overhead where once there had been explosions and gunfire. He hadn't bothered to tell Dawn about any of that, since she seemed to have enough on her frazzled mind to begin with. Beatty couldn't blame her, feeling that she weathered being on someone's menu pretty well. Where the hell was Sinflake? No text, no drone, no voice of synthetic divinity riding thunderbolts. Oh well, Big Daddy thought, maybe she got bored. Either way, he had hard land to cross with the added weight of this unblooded lamb, a chore he felt strongly needed to be done. He wouldn't die for her, although after yesterday's mania, he wasn't even sure about that, but he would certainly kill and destroy to see her return to civilization. Anything was more civilized than living in a slaughter pen, waiting to be cored out by the local voodoo in the name of Cosmic Zero. When Big Daddy was king one day, he would have that sewer scoured out by psychopathic mercenaries, whom he would overpay to do the job properly. One look at the lamb made BD wish he had assets to spare, but his friends were fewer and fewer these days. His mind went blank at the thought of it, refocusing himself on the here and now. They traveled westward at a decent pace, finding themselves in a vast rail yard complex which lay adjacent to the industrial park. Big Daddy marked the obvious link between the two infrastructures, knowing the railroad lines that they belonged to, and so gaining a greater orientation of where he was in the grand scheme of things. The highway leading back home was not far off. He needed to get this done, needed to see Dawn to the settlement. He could not abandon her after all she had been through. He took the time to bump some high-grade booger sugar, which went right to his dome, sending him into a focus of hyperclarity, a thing much needed after such shallow sleep. Soon they found themselves moving past rail cars and in and out of tunnels, some of which led into the earth, while others seemed to be metal structures used for maintenance. There were open drainage and sewer pipes now and then, setting Dawn on edge and causing her to stay close to Big Daddy as he swept over the garbage-strewn gravel. Dawn suddenly tensed up and stifled a scream. Before them lay a bloody skeleton, picked clean of viable flesh, the limbs ghoulishly, haphazardly splayed. A swarm of flies scattered and relit themselves on the glazed bones, buzzing resentfully at the unwanted intrusion. Big Daddy heard a hiss toward his right, seeing something not entirely human shambling in a crab walk. It dashed at them, sounding as if it were not alone. A chorus of hissing joined the lone creature as it crept in incubus fashion, with a fresh forming froth foaming from its foul-smelling mouth. Big Daddy unstrapped his grenade launcher and fired at the creatures. In a series of elegant movements, he dropped the launcher and drew his long blade, and then stepped into a lateral strike, bisecting the still hissing leader at the shoulder. Just as the creature dropped into silence, the grenade detonated, sending a hail of smoking gravel and sizzling giblets to rain down around them. There was something like a squealing in the detonation's haze, the sound of it reminding Big Daddy of a pig being slaughtered. He checked back at Dawn, who looked at him as if he were the Archangel Michael himself. Gladness behind the eyes, that he stood between her and whatever else was out there. Her rash-splotched face turned suddenly pale as some new horror came to replace the old. Big Daddy spun his head and beheld a nightmare tide of giant rats, the whole super pack on the move, seeking to feast on the freshly cooked meat laying all around. The squealing became momentarily frenzied before falling away into a horrific noise of rending and chewing. Big Daddy turned to Dawn and gestured that they should boogie. So they did after his retrieval of the grenade launcher. Terror motivated Dawn enough where she kept up, but by the end of 1,000 feet, she huffed badly and needed Big Daddy to carry her. The rats gave no pursuit, contented by the bloody gravel and access to chipped monster bits hashed up for the taking. It was a long walk before they stopped for a breather, with the wind rising higher so that each gust jingle-jangled more and more of their surroundings. It was hard to hear anything above the rushing air, howling in and out of structures and tunnels to make a music both haunting as well as distracting. After a while, they got up from resting and resumed their progress, wary of both rats and the appearance of more of the creatures they feasted on. Big Daddy put up a metal hand, as if cautioning Dawn to keep quiet. Just as he did this, a horrific roar sounded out, loud as a car accident. Atop a rail car, there stooped a gigantic man-thing, its deep breathing occasionally heard between the rising and falling of the wind. This aberration roamed like a wild animal, a former lab rat in an experiment from long ago. Failing security tech from stasis into the wilderness of concrete and steel, adding further insult to injury to the genetic lottery out in the dead zone. Big Daddy didn't have it in him to face this thing toe-to-toe, so he leveled the grenade launcher with intent to fire. Just as he was to squeeze the trigger and delete this thing from the evolutionary record, a huge stone swatted the launcher out of his metal hand. Its rhythmic clattering drew the giant's gaze, who then immediately turned to converge on them. Beyond the further rail car, there ambled a host of bipedal post-humans, not the crab crawlers from before. These knew the delicate mystery of rock throwing. BD and Dawn were caught between a rock and a hard place, causing the former to draw double pistols and spray bullets into the gathering horde. Several bodies went down, offering deterrence to the mob, bringing second guesses to their otherwise united front. Then the giant was on them, having leapt like Tarzan from the roof of the rail car to within 20 feet of their position. It slunk up to Dawn, who shrieked as if she would be run down by a train. There was little time to spare. Big Daddy plunged both bayonets into the gravel and rolled as he drew his long blade. Dawn had been lofted up in the creature's many-fingered claw, feeling no breath in her lungs as it crushed her fitfully. As her face was drawn in toward its horrifying mouth, a roar blasted out as Big Daddy's blade struck bone. First, the huge leg was severed, then the arm in which she rode came away, sheared at the elbow. Dawn gagged as she slammed on the gravel, drawing desperate breaths into her trembling body. Big Daddy slashed the beast's throat and then clove at the shoulder, shedding gallons of sour blood. At last, the giant collapsed into motionless death. Big Daddy wasted no time in replacing the long blade back onto its magnetic harness and retrieving his pistols. He fired a few more shots at the lingering rock throwers, sincerely encouraging them to rethink this practice. After a quick reload, he went to check on Dawn. She seemed unharmed, if not a bit mortified, shaking as if death itself had just knocked on her front door. Big Daddy retrieved the grenade launcher from where it landed, assessing it for damage. It was fine, thankfully, and so he restrapped it to his back. He then unstrapped his shotgun and continued with Dawn, pumping a blast or two at anything that even looked as if it could throw a rock. A chittering could be heard through the windy white noise, sounding as if imps out of hell were amusedly wringing hands with fiendish delight. Their minds spun into yet another level of unimagined horror as a legion of post-human children emerged and gathered from every conceivable direction. Big Daddy grabbed Dawn rudely and dashed with her toward the rail car where they first saw the giant. He threw her up the ladder and followed, pushing her and yelling for speed as the child legion flooded in below them. It was almost a miracle that Dawn made it up as fast as she did, being driven past all wits to exertions beyond any previous effort. Once atop the car, they fled across its length toward the next one. As they leapt from one car to the next, the foul creatures rushed around below, with some climbing up to give chase on an even plane. Big Daddy turned around while producing his grenade launcher, firing it into the onrushing imps who dared to climb up among them. The blast tore through them like an iron fist, vaporizing some and sending the rest to become food for those beneath. BD and Dawn fled over a long line of rail cars, eventually finding a ladder down to ground level. Down a steep embankment, they beheld running water, and with it a chance to change locations. His data said that there would be a lot of water near the settlement, and he could see a boat floating where a dock used to be along a grimy shoreline. Big Daddy helped Dawn down the embankment. They then assessed the seaworthiness of the 10-foot boat. More noise up the hill spurred them on, and before they knew it, the open water surrounded them. Far behind, a mass of starving mutant children was gathered on the shore, their frustrated hisses and snarls passing away into a windy distance. Well, folks, that was chapter 4 of Babbletron, After the Fire. That's my little book. Tom, what did you think of that read, sir? We'll start
even
with
better, even better the third time. It just gets more layered as I'm listening. If
Thank
that's
you.
possible, right?
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. It's high praise from you, bro. Amber, how about you? What'd you think of the read?
I like the intense. I like the intensive immersion of your story. You just build your world around them and make them see it.
Yes, yes, that is the intention. Thank you. How about you, David? Were you able to hear that one?
Yes, I did. I really liked it. It was full of a constant flow of action, and it had a kind of intensity that was, and it wasn't a. It had substance to its intensity, or it's not just graphic violence, but it was also written in a very high style that almost made me think of a comic book.
Wonderful.
So so it had that kind of, so it could be appreciated in many age groups too. So
right on.
Yeah, it was. I liked it a lot.
Very good. Thank you so much. Well, folks, this is just like every other show. It's over before we realize, right? Here we are and it's closing time. I want to thank David for joining us today, and Amber, and as always, Tom. It's great doing this show with you. We have a blast reading and talking Creative Shop. Just getting better and better. So what we'll do is we'll hit you with some plugs. It's what butters the bread, folks. Please go to joeswritersclub.com. Sign up at joeswriters.club. Check out JWC's social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And head on to our YouTube channel, please. Go there, like and subscribe, and share if you think there's anyone who would dig us. Leave comments and let us know what you think of the show. We have a blast making it for you, but we'd love to hear from you all the same. So we'll start with Amber. Amber, what are you plugging today?
Well, currently the goal is to get Death's Nightmare onto Kindle Unlimited so that the Kindle Unlimited folks can have a crack at it and hopefully get, my name out there and get noticed a little more.
Heck yeah.
It should be on there by Monday.
Very good.
Right on. Tom, how about you, man?
I have 2 short story collections on Kindle. Is It Still Out There? And the first one is Dwellers in the Shadows. And I want to take a special moment for Joe's Writers Club Publications has put out their first collection of stories called Corporate Gothic. It was a blast writing stories for that, and the stories are all really good. Unlike the other book that I was at, other anthology I was published in earlier this year. This one's really, really good. And it's volume 1, and we are going to be looking for participants for volume 2, starting in a few weeks. That should be a lot of fun. But yes, Corporate Gothic was awesome.
Man, it's a good thing you mentioned it, Tom. Corporate Gothic goes back to the origin of JWC years and years ago, and we did all the old school did the first volume, and it was always our intention to do a volume 2. So come over to JWC and let's see what we can figure out, man. We may start taking submissions, like Tom's saying, and see what's up, because it would be great to have a volume 2. And I'm not going to write for it. I want to see what other people do with the genre. It's its own unique subgenre of horror, and it's really a wonderful playground for your imagination. And if you come join us,
I hate to cut you short, but I just had a knock at my door, so I gotta go.
Peace out. Take care.
Yes, see you soon.
See everybody.
Yep. Yeah, and that being said, now that Amber's going to go, we're going to take off too, folks. My book is Babbletron After the Fire. I just read a chapter of it. If you enjoyed that, please head over to Amazon and check it out. Make a great Christmas present. It's right around the corner. And Tom, you plugged your stuff.
Right.
All right, folks. We're gonna take off. Tom?
Be seeing you,
like
and Babbletron.
Right.
Babbletron is like Terminator on speed. I have to tell you that. Yeah, it was very, very good. I mean, so it just kept coming at you, and it was like you couldn't get enough. Yeah, it was like the best popcorn of all time. I mean,
right on.
Anyway, so I'll see everybody next time.
Thank you, Tom. Those were beautiful words. And David, take care. All right, folks.